Hello and welcome to our Tech Venture podcast. I am Janvi Agrawal, your host. Today, we have got a special guest, David Goemans, the Chief Technology Officer at Faslet. He is a tech pro with a lot of experience in making games and software. He's done some pretty cool stuff, leading teams, working with codes like JavaScript, C++, and C programming, and even making fun games for different gadgets using Unity 3D and HTML5. But here's the exciting part. Today, we are not just talking tech. We are delving into how David tackles creating brand new stuff. Yeah, we are going deep into new product development. David's got the scope of solving problems, being a great leader, designing systems, and making tech not just work, but to work in a cool way. So let's buckle up and jump into adventure of creating new tech goodies with David. Okay, before we dive into the tech talk, David, let's get to know him better. David, tell us about your journey in tech world. How did you get into this field? What cool experiences you had? Your audience is eager to know the personal side and the adventure that shaped your career.
Hi, Janvi. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here. So my background is a bit all over the place. I'm originally from South Africa. Grew up and studied in South Africa. Studied software development and mathematics. In South Africa, I still worked for 2 years in the simulation industry, so mining vehicle simulation for training purposes, which was quite a cool first job to have directly out of university. Then moved over to the Netherlands directly into the games industry, which I spent a couple of years in, which was a lot of fun. Lots of new products, obviously, because it's games and you're always in a creative industry and always creating new things. The games industry for a while, and then decided to move across to general tech. So I spent a couple of years in different tech industries, from safety software to fintech to e-commerce. And in the last couple of years, I've started a company with some former colleagues of mine in the fashion tech industry, where we provide a size advice solution for fashion websites. So we're basically, if you don't know your size of a particular product, we provide a little button that goes on the page, and that button says something like, what is my size, or in whatever language you're looking at the page in. And you can click the button, fill in some basic information about yourself, such as your height and weight, and out will come the answer, like it will say you're 36, or you're a medium, or you're large, or whatever it might end up being. So that's sort of my journey over the last couple of years. I've been in the Netherlands for quite a while now. And yeah, I've been heavily involved in the tech industry here. Gotten very much into meeting different people from the tech industry. And yeah, been trying to go into a more like company building kind of role as opposed to just tech involvement. Although my background was in, development across the board, front and back end, full stack, whatever. It's also kind of in, as you mentioned, management and sort of growing a team and now especially growing a company from scratch.
Okay, that's nice. Your journey has been quite a roller coaster.
Yeah, definitely. The switch from games to tech was sort of a career restart, because I spent, I think, like 8 years in games. And then I've spent the subsequent almost years in just general tech. And yeah, that is a career restart, but it was for the best, because it very much broadened my horizons on the kind of stuff that I learned and the experience that I got.
Okay, nice. So, David, you have introduced yourself. We will dive into the Q&A.
Sure.
Okay. So, before diving into it, I just want to ask you the permission to introduce myself and my organization as well.
No, of course.
Okay. So, dear audience, I am Janvi Agrawal, your host. And this episode is proudly brought to you by Avatar Tech, a pioneering technology solution provider dedicated to innovations and efficiency. Avatar Tech focuses main on IT solutions, IT resources, recruitment, and tech audio podcast. We have vendor alliances with 50 plus tech partners, including SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, Pega, Cloudera, Informatica, and many more. Our key solutions include ERP, application development, data and AI, cloud managed services, UX, UI, testing, and cybersecurity. We have resource base of 20,000 plus resources across all skills, which we can deliver both on-site and offshore within 24 hours. Out of that, we love to hear views of visionary tech. So let's get started with one of our esteemed guests, David. So shall we start with the Q&A?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so David, can you just walk us through your experience in new product development? What specific products have you been involved in developing?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in my intro, I have worked on a lot of different industries. Games, of course, there were a lot of new products because we did a lot of new IPs and new games, that was incredibly fun. But where things really got interesting for me was sort of jumping into the general tech sector. I worked in a safety software company for the oil and gas industry, and I sort of became kind of a go-to person for getting things out of the door. So it wasn't like a lot of it was new products, but some of it was also existing products that were not yet released, but we were struggling to get out of the door and get released. So I kind of jump into that and push them out the door. And then after that, there was a lot of consulting, which was all basically new products and new lines within fintech. For example, there was a trading platform, e-commerce. We did some stuff with a large British greeting card company. And then after that, I was trying to build up my own new software, and a former colleague approached me to start a new company, Faslet, which I mentioned is fashion tech sizing advice tool. And that, the product that we have, the Size Me Up sizing solution, was basically completely new. We built it from scratch. We bootstrapped the entire company from scratch. So the product itself, we had nothing when we started, and we've gone from that with just a few consultants to what we are now with closing on 80 partners.
That's impressive. 80 partners.
Yeah, mostly focused in the Netherlands in the Dutch fashion industry. I think we're closing on about 4 million users actually seeing our button on websites every month.
Oh, okay, that's nice. But how did you find the gap? Like, how did you identify this was the need of the market?
So the company itself, we sort of started based on personal need. And I think from the stories I've heard from other colleagues and friends in a similar situation is that's kind of where the best product market fits come from, where someone sees something that they're struggling with and says, you know what, we could build something to fix that. And so Faslet started with the idea of my two other co-founders during the pandemic running into the issue that they couldn't try on clothes in fitting rooms in the shop. And so the idea was, I don't know whether this will fit me. Why can't we solve this with tech? And so, a couple iterations later, there was first an app and a few things. And of course, in a startup, you kind of pivot back and forth a little bit. But we sort of ended up with the sizing solution for the web stores. And I think that's very interesting in the sense that it was a personal need, and we found out that we weren't the only ones who needed it. And then obviously as we dug into it, we found out we weren't the only ones in the market. But what you sort of see is that, someone else has said, we need this. And as we approached our first customers, they also said, we definitely need something like this. There's a gap here in the market. So you sort of find that initial idea based on something you run into, a little annoyance within your own personal life, and then think, how can I solve this? Can I be part of the solution here rather than just...
The idea, like it was just from the personal needs. Then you found a solution to it and then you related to it.
Yep, that's exactly it. We saw that there was a problem. We looked into it. We started building a solution, and then we spoke to potential customers. And of course, when you're in this sort of startup-y stage, your first customers are not necessarily paying customers. You're just trying to get people on board to see if this is even worth doing. And so we got a couple people to try it out, and they liked it. And we kind of built on from there. And we listened to our first customers, some of which are still with us, which has been a great journey a couple of years down the line. But yeah, definitely just from personal need and grabbing a couple friends in the industry that could be pilot customers.
Okay, but I just want to know, like, how did you link it with the technology?
Well, yeah, it was kind of an obvious technological solution in the sense that this was during the pandemic. So there was limited room for physical contact. So we immediately had to say, how can we solve this? And myself and the two other co-founders we're from the tech industry. So our first go-to is always tech. And then we immediately think, okay, what tools can we use to solve this? And we kind of dive into that and then look into, okay, these are the set of tools that we can pick up to solve this particular problem. And this is what we expect it to look like and behave like. And, spoke to friends with the e-commerce stores to kind of dig into what they need in order to be able to implement it.
Okay, so it was basically you had connections in the technology team. So you had a conversation with them and you linked it.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you face any challenges and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, we faced a lot of challenges. Building your own company it's a roller coaster, and especially because we don't have big VC funding behind us, which was an intentional choice. We wanted to bootstrap this and not give away any of our equity from the early days. So because of that, probably our biggest challenge, and still to some extent remains, is keeping costs low and optimizing for costs, because that's incredibly important for us. And as part of that, we need to automate things as much as possible, because generally in a company like this, your biggest costs are your personnel costs. So where you can make sure we're not spending more on personnel than we need to, we try our best to do that. And then, of course, because we grew really quickly, like at some point, we were sort of doubling users within 2 or 3 months. We suddenly then had to handle the issue of scale. And that's still an ongoing thing, where we're constantly looking at our database usage to seeing how we can optimize that. But, overcoming problems of automation or problems of scale is really about picking the right infrastructure, picking the right stack that you use for it. So in our particular case, we use AWS's serverless stack, which is Lambdas, and for the longest time we use their serverless database offering, and that is the best way to bootstrap a startup because your initial costs are low, and it automatically scales with you until you kind of hit the point where we're at now, where it just won't really scale anymore, and then it's better to switch across to more stable, more expensive and more managed things. But yeah, so we basically tackled scale through technology, and yeah, automation is one of the ways we've kept our costs down.
Okay, but as you know, like cost is the most important thing to manage. So how do you manage a project budgets related to it while developing a new product?
Yeah, so for us, as I said, we're bootstrapped. So, the goal is normally as cheap as possible. Not always anymore, of course, but initially at least it was keep the cost down as much as possible. So in order to do that and to manage that budget, because we set quite strict budgets, especially early days, a lot of it is about scope management and expectation management. So you need to make sure that your projects are scoped realistically, and you also need to be immediately ready to cut things from scope when you think it might go over budget. So, there might be features that you're building where you sort of go like, what parts of these features are optional? And then immediately cut those if you see any risk of going over budget there. Or even within an agile development process, you don't build the optional features first. You build the core functionality first and keep the product as small and as lean as possible so that your immediate ability to test that in the market is a lot quicker and a lot cheaper. And then you can add to it. And if you find those optional features are still required, you add them. But, sometimes you find those optional features are not required. And then you cut them from your development cycle. And then similarly, expectation management is very much about making sure that people across the board, your stakeholders within the company, as well as your customers outside of the company, sort of know what they're going to get out of this as a first version. So, for example, when we launched our shoes line, so we also do sizing advice on shoes. We actually found a customer who was willing to be an early access test partner for this, and they knew this. So we did a very basic version very cheaply. It only took a few weeks to build and release. And we told the customer, look, we've got an early access version. We want to test this. We want to see how this performs. Are you willing to do this? And they were more than happy, because they're a very large multi-brand store here in the Netherlands. And they were more than happy to jump in and test out shoes with us. And they're still incredibly happy. They gave us some great feedback. We've iterated on it with them. And now we've rolled out shoes to most of our customers based on that initial early version, which was kept well within scope, and we kept their expectations relatively low, but they were super happy with it.
Okay, that's nice. So basically, how did you how much time did it took for you to launch the product?
So our initial shoes, I think end to end, we probably did about 1 month, maybe a bit less. Because we're in ongoing development, we don't work necessarily in sprints. We work in sort of priority sets in an agile way. So I can't say exactly how many sprints or something along those lines, but I think it was 3 weeks end to end for shoes. We did a bunch of research, a bunch of pre-product development before we actually started the touching code. And then, the coding side of it was only about 2 or 3 weeks. And then, we got in touch with a partner, and they were happy to jump on board. So we released it with them, which, was instant because of the way our whole setup is managed.
So basically, how do you measure the success of a new product?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, revenue is a key metric. But the important thing to look at when you're in the product side of things is what is actually driving that revenue. So at Faslet, we generally measure 2 core metrics around that. Obviously, we measure a lot of metrics, but the main ones we look at are our usage. So our pricing structure is currently based around tiers of number of users who interact with our system. So from our perspective, the more users who interact with our system, the more revenue we end up getting. So that's a key success measurement. And shoes, for example, if we've already got a partner that has clothing and they want to add shoes, we're instantly getting more users because we're getting more people who could interact with our system. So that's, we measure usage and we try and drive up usage. So that's an immediate output metric from any new feature that we add to the product. And then accuracy is the other one that we measure, because, I mean, just getting new revenue is one thing. And there's a lot of companies, which I can think of in Silicon Valley, who are entirely driven by, short-term revenue. But for us, retention is way more important. We need very high accuracy, because if our product works, our customers just stick with us. They don't go anywhere. And that is critical, because if they stick with us, they're paying us a monthly fee, and that's for us consistent revenue for a much longer period. So we really do focus on both increasing our number of users, but as well as our accuracy, because that both of those things together drive revenue in the long term and drive value for our customers as well. Because the thing that they want in the long term is increasing their conversion and reducing their returns. So if we can 100% prove that works, that is the key metric, and that drives our revenue.
Okay, the interesting parameter I liked here was the accuracy. So you are building a custom base out of it as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you, and I've seen this on certain sites from some of our competitors where, I've gone to a particular shop I buy shoes from normally, and they've got one of our competitors' shoe sizing widgets. And I've opened it up and I've filled in, my reference brand of, I always buy Etnies shoes. And I've filled in, I'm normally a size 42. What should I get? And I'm literally looking at the same shoe and it gives me a different size. So immediately I lose trust in that product. And that's where accuracy is so important, because I want the end consumer to have trust in our product. And if the end consumer has trust in our product, that improves the conversion for our customers and reduces their return. So it improves the revenue for our customers. And then it improves our revenue by proxy of that.
Okay. So David, how do you achieve giving high quality results while managing your project cost?
So, we budget quite far ahead of time to manage those costs. So we know normally we set up a budget for a year in advance, and then we sort of refine it on a quarterly basis. But then we know at least how much we're going to have for budget. And so to balance between high quality results and the costs, we have to pick very carefully what we spend on. So a lot of it is about prioritizing. And we, in our early years, this was a lot tougher. We've gotten quite good at it over the last 3 years. But we prioritize very, very efficiently, but very carefully based on what the actual needs are from the customers. And that not necessarily the end users, but also our partners. So we really focus on those most important things, and we put our resources into the 90% use cases. So often you'll see people trying to cover every single edge case, and often that's just not necessary, because you don't know until you put a product in the market whether it's going to work and whether it's going to be worth having covered that extra 10% of edge cases. So things like browser compatibility for arbitrary browsers, we don't spend much time on it because we look at our statistics and we see, 99% of our browser coverage is Chrome and Safari. So we make sure those work really well, and we don't spend much time on Firefox as much as I'd love to. I check every once in a while, it still works, but it is one of those things where if something minor breaks in Firefox, maybe 5 out of our 4 million monthly users will even see it. So it's not too much of a concern, and we save some money by not really focusing on those things.
Okay, so basically you manage your cost very effectively by prioritizing things which are much in need.
Yes, exactly. By looking at what has the most impact and focusing on those things. And then if we see other things have impact, we'll focus on that too. But for now, at least, we focus on the most impactful changes.
So, but David, there's always a chance. Even if you launch a product, there might be a risk.
Of course, yeah.
How do you manage your risk? And can you just give us an example where you have managed risks very successfully?
Yeah, sure. Risk management is kind of a big topic on its own. And I think, Facebook in its early days famously said, go fast and break things. And they got a lot of criticism for that, and now have kind of shifted away from that. But I think the mentality behind that, especially in a small startup, is the idea of being able to fail fast. So you want to be able to learn where things go wrong as quickly as possible. So this is something that we try and do, and that's part of our whole agile mindset of build the required product as small and as quickly as possible to test it. And then, obviously don't take unnecessary risks. Even though I trust our infrastructure and I'm normally more than happy to do it, I still don't do releases on a Friday. And the team agrees with me on this. We could, because I trust our infrastructure, but we've been in enough situations where something small has gone wrong, which was unexpected, that you don't want to be in that situation. So don't take unnecessary risks, but do try things in a situation where you can monitor it quickly, get feedback quickly, and either roll things back quickly or continue on and expand on it quickly. So you know whether something has succeeded or failed very quickly. Get that feedback as quickly as possible. So a good example is, and I wrote a blog post series on it recently, we migrated our front end from Vue 2 to Vue 3, which was actually quite a big migration, especially in terms of the build pipeline. So the way we rolled this out, we made like a massive change. Basically, the entire front end was rewritten, but we obviously can't just roll that out to everyone in our network on one day and then hope that everything worked. So we immediately built a system where we switched gradually from the old front end to the new front end and tested it on specific sites. So we had the option to fail fast. We could see immediately if something went wrong. And then we picked our most edge case partners and we rolled it out to those ones with a percentage of users. And then we tested it. And then we saw if everything worked. And if it didn't work, we fixed something and then we rolled out a new version. So you could see we immediately iterated on it when things did fail. And I think that's the way to get over that, is to immediately make changes when things do fail, but have the ability to move fast like that. So the quicker you can find out if something's not working, the better.
Okay, so you just concluded it very right. Change immediately. Once you know there is a risk, just change yourselves.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So basically, how do you align the new products? Like it is going according to the company's strategic direction.
There's a lot to be said about communication there, because I've worked in companies where I've seen tech teams not really talk to stakeholders or even talk to customers or talk to the people in contact with customers. And for me, that's always a big failure. I think it's very important to be in contact with your customers, not necessarily directly between the tech team and the customers, but at least indirectly, and talk to subject matter experts and talk to people who are directly involved with the customers. So it's very important to have open communication there. And generally, new products shouldn't come from the tech team. They should come from the business and the stakeholders, sales, subject matter experts, people who are directly involved. The stakeholders are the mouthpiece. So, sure, there's some things that you need to do that are purely tech, but generally speaking, new product features should be something that we see a need for in the market. And I think the need for in the market is kind of difficult because it's, sometimes customers will say things and that's not actually what you should be building. You should be building something that they actually need, which makes them say those things. So that's always quite difficult, but it's very much about aligning that with stakeholders, having those discussions and kind of getting to the bottom of what the customer need is there.
Yeah, basically there's a difference between the need and the want, and you will have to specifically focus on the need.
Exactly. That's exactly.
Customers are the main supporters here.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay. So how do you stay updated with the emerging technologies and trends in your industry?
So for me, most of it comes down to networking and people that I've worked with in the past, friends and former colleagues. I think that's really important for anyone within their tech career, is to sort of build up a network of people that you've worked with. And I think, it's sort of a big tip that I give to junior developers is to get to know the senior development. So having a group of friends who have worked in the tech industry is very helpful, because you can just ask them and they might have some experience or might know someone who has some experience and get some information for you. And I think that's very important. But then on top of that, networking can also completely change your career. It can, I've firsthand experienced this, where certain companies I've worked with and certain people I've worked with have brought me along to 3 or 4 other roles after that, just because we worked well together and we enjoyed working together. And then you meet more people who bring you along to different roles, and that sort of cascades a little bit like that. But indeed, I think the biggest thing is to make friends, and obviously, conferences and keeping up with tech and meetups and things like that is important. But that's, again, part of networking. And it especially helps if you have a friend that you drag with to meetups and conferences. And, we've sometimes gone as companies to meetups and conferences, and that's so incredibly important for building your network and finding out about new things.
Any other tip other than networking? Any specific resources that you rely on apart from networking? I
mean, I think, these days, obviously the internet is full of information, some of it just over the top or not very useful. ChatGPT is incredibly helpful for a lot of Bootstrap code, which has actually become quite a funny thing. GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT have sort of appeared on the scene in the last year and a half out of nowhere, and have become, I think, for a lot of people, a prime resource in working out how to do things. But yeah, I think, meetups and conferences for trends is very interesting, because sometimes you you hear about things that you've never heard about before. And, for example, the emergence of the alternate JavaScript runtimes. So it's not just Node.js anymore. You've got Dino, which I first heard about it at a conference, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. And then Bun, which I heard about through some friends last year. So it's, a combination between meetups and conferences and friends.
Basically, the people around you and your surrounding, you must be aware about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are the technologies, David, that you are going to use in your upcoming product development or ongoing product that you are using?
Yeah. So our company is kind of built around AWS for our infrastructure, and I think we're definitely going to stick to that for as long as possible. I'm really a big fan of AWS and the way it's structured. Our tech team loves it, so that's been going quite well. Keeping to Lambdas for most of our day-to-day operation for that ability to sort of scale infinitely, and then some database structures around that and things like that. But in terms of the code side of things, we're a full TypeScript, I guess, TypeScript stack. So we've got Node.js on the back end, which we're really happy with. We've got React and Vue on the front end. So we've got React for our partner portal and Vue.js for our actual on-site code, the Size Me Up assistant. In terms of going forward, I think we'll definitely stick to AWS and probably Node.js on the back end. What I'm really liking at the moment, and we had such great experiences with that migration to Vue 3, is the way Vue 3 is sort of growing. So Vue 2 sort of felt like a bit of an early version of React almost in terms of maturity, but Vue 3 really